Well, hello, everyone. This is David Myers, the Executive Director of the Conservation Finance Alliance. We are very pleased to continue our webinar series with a presentation from Christian Lim, who's a co-founder of Blue Ocean Partners. And Blue Ocean Partners are taking, well, maybe more of a traditional approach to some pretty innovative challenges, and really looking forward to hear Christian's presentation. What we're going to do is Christian will give about a 25 minute presentation, after which we'll have plenty of time for question and answer. And the best way for you to be letting us know you have a question is to maybe type something into the chat. And then when we give you a call, then you can unmute your microphone and ask directly. Or if you're not in a good place for speaking, you just let us know and we will read your question directly from the chat box. So without further ado, Christian, over to you.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you, David and Jenny, for hosting me, and to Conservation Finance Alliance for hosting us and giving us the opportunity to share about our passion and work for the ocean. And so welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining in. I'm speaking to you from Paris. And today, so we'll discuss about how we can harness the power of innovation to restore ocean health. And I'll start by saying just a few words about myself and Blue Ocean's Partners, which has been leading this this project. And after that, we'll go through very concrete examples of how innovation can help us, address in a substantial way ocean challenges. So about myself, if we wanted to summarize, I am both a free diver and an investment professional. So free diving is what really taught me at the same time the beauty of the ocean and its fragility, the beauty in the sense, I've been able to dive to free dive in amazing places in the Palau in Micronesia, and swim and dive with manta rays. But I've also witnessed as a free diver firsthand the damage that we have caused already somewhere in the Indian Ocean. I dove on the coral reef and saw it completely breached, and asking spearfishers how long it took to get to that stage. They told me it took 15 years. So I gained really first-hand sense of its fragility of the ocean as well. But also I gained a lot of hope through that activity, diving in places like Porco, which is the oldest marine reserve in France, where I saw that, after protecting this place properly for 50 years, nature bounced back in an amazing way, and is offering to anyone who just makes the effort to take a 30-minute boat ride to witness the abundance of the ocean. And so this is also the experience of freediving taught me about the resilience of the ocean, and I think is a very big driver in myself and the team, engaging in that endeavor. So that's my oceans, about my connection with the ocean. On my professional experience, I've been an investor for quite a while. I was investment director at African Invest, which is one of the largest private equity firms focused on Africa, with 1.4 billion euros under management. But before that, I also worked in the corporate world for companies like Veolia and Saint-Gobain. I actually worked on waste management, and I also worked with governments, with the African Development Bank, advising African governments on their private sector development strategies, and also with NGOs such as the Red Cross for which I actually led disaster relief mission after the tsunami in 2005 in Indonesia. And so I bring an investment experience to that project, but also experience across both public and private sector. And I think that is, yeah, that is probably, it's an important aspect of the way we approach investment for oceans. We want to keep, we want to bring together those two words that often are separate, but when they are together can be a very powerful force. So now about Blue Ocean's partners, it's a finance platform that was recently created this year, and the mission of Blue Ocean's partners is to mobilize private capital for the regeneration of ocean health and to achieve SDG 14. And innovation is the central piece of our strategy. And this is why we did a lot of research in that space. We actually set up an investment fund to help scale the innovations that can help that can address ocean challenges. And what we're going to present now are few of is an overview of our analysis and the solutions that we see, and concrete examples of how innovation can help. So moving to the next slide and just checking that you're all seeing the next slides, and you seeing myself as well, or David?
Yes, it's a perfect split screen. It works.
Okay, great. So first, let us talk about a little bit about why we're doing this, why we need to address ocean challenges. I'm sure if you've tuned in that you are already very aware of that. However, it's still useful, I think, to highlight some of the features of what we think is a deep crisis that is unfolding. The crisis that the oceans are facing is specific in a number of ways. One is that the scale of ocean challenges is really unprecedented. If we just take, the example of coral reefs, just today, just very recently, in 2016 and 2017, because of massive bleaching events, we lost about 50% of the Great Barrier Reef. And so, and at the same time, this is happening at a very fast pace, because the forecast is that by 2050 we may lose up to 90% of coral reefs. If you look at the challenge of overfishing, we can make exactly the same observations. Today, 90% of fish stocks are either overfished or on the brink of becoming overfished, and 30% of fish stocks are overfished, while it was only 8% 40 years ago. So you can see with those very simple numbers that the challenge has already reached a huge scale, and that the situation is deteriorating very fast. And if we try to think about the root causes of why the ocean challenges are so daunting, they really we can really find those causes in the very way today we're consuming, we're producing, and we're distributing. So it's really the core of our way of life that is the cause of those issues, and this is why we need to address the challenges by creating systemic change. We cannot address them by just changing things at the margin. And at the same time, because those changes are, the dynamics are so fast, are so quick, we need to address, to create those systemic changes very rapidly. And at the same time, as we need to address those issues, we can only call on very scarce resources. if we look at the needs to address the SDGs, as estimated by United Nations, numbers of $2.5 trillion needed are floated per year, and many of you who are working in the conservation space know that we don't have that money available, and that it's quite unlikely that we will have that money available anytime soon. So at the same time, we're facing the need for rapid systemic change, and at the same time, we have very scarce resources. So how do we address this situation? So obviously, we need to use all the levers possible. We need to continue to work on education. We need to continue to work on regulation. We need to continue to build infrastructure. But when you look at the history of our work collectively on those areas, we know there are limits. And so if you look at education, I think the level of awareness of ocean challenges today is really unprecedented. So we have done a great work at educating about these issues. But at the same time, if you look at people like you and me, who are probably among the most educated about ocean challenges, we see that it's very hard to change the way we live. If we take the issue of single-use plastics, I'm probably among the most aware of, on the planet, that we need to stop using single-use plastics, but I still do it because I have sometimes I just have no choice. And so there are limits to what education can achieve. On regulation, it's a very powerful tool. We can put taxes on single-use plastics. We can even ban some single-use plastics, but regulation is very slow to be passed, and there are lobbies, and so we know that to achieve rapid change is going to be hard, to rely just on regulation. And if we look at infrastructure, I mentioned a number just before. We know there's just not enough money today to finance the infrastructure that we need to address ocean challenges. So that brings us to the role that innovation can play as a complement to all those levers that we have. What we find innovation is a very useful and clearly overlooked tool today, because innovation can achieve changes at the system level. And we'll see plenty of examples of that, but just to illustrate the idea, I will take the example of infrastructure. So we all know that we need to build waste collection and treatment systems infrastructure in Southeast Asia, where most of the pollution plastic pollution is taking place. But if we just do it with the old technologies, the old approaches, we know it's going to be too costly to be able to achieve that in a reasonable amount of time. But what if we brought to the market and scaled an innovation or a series of innovations that can make actually recycled plastic cheaper than virgin plastic? Imagine that for a moment. Then suddenly you create a world where all packaging manufacturers, all brands will want to use recycled plastic, not because it's good for the planet, but because it's cheaper and it's more competitive for them to do so. So that would create a huge $350 billion market for recycled plastic. And that creates the foundation, the incentive to actually put in place the proper infrastructure to collect, sort, and recycle the waste plastic, because waste plastic has become a very valuable resource. And this is exactly the type of change, a systemic change, that we're looking for, and the type of innovations that we're supporting that can achieve such changes. What a second aspect, feature of innovation that is very interesting is that investing in innovations can be very profitable. As a result, if they work, if they're relevant, they can scale rapidly just with private capital. And we know that private capital, when it finds the right opportunities, can be very powerful and very fast. And this is how the Facebooks of this world, the Googles of this world, the Uber of this world, have been able to scale very rapidly. And this is the type of, of large-scale change and this type of pace that we want to bring, we want to bring for our ocean. I think that gives an overview, and so the conclusion of that is that we believe innovation is a critical tool to maximize the impact we can achieve for every dollar that we have out of the scarce resources that are available to us. And so we'll try to illustrate that through a number of examples. Example number one. So I'm showing on this picture, a few salmon. The reason is that salmon is the first farmed fish that has been fed commercially with insect-based proteins as a substitute to fish meal. And this is a critical innovation that is about to scale now. And it is critical for ocean conservation for the following reason. If you look at the consumption of fish by humans, the demand is growing by 8% every year, 4%, sorry, every year, and there are only two sources for that fish. The one is wild fish stocks, and the other one is aquaculture. And we already making the transition from sourcing our fish from the sea to sea farms, to fish farms. In 2014, the production of farmed fish actually overtook the production of wild-caught fish. However, for aquaculture to continue to play its role to supply human beings with fish, it needs to address one critical challenge. It is the fact that farmed fish is still fed with fish meal, which comes from wild-caught fish. And as I said in the introduction, fish stocks for fish meal are also either overfished or fished to their fullest extent. And therefore, there's actually a very acute supply and demand mismatch in the fish meal market. And as a result, if we don't find alternatives to fish meal to feed farmed fish, aquaculture is actually at risk of not being able to grow at all anymore and to hit a wall pretty soon. And that would result in all the pressure from growing demand for fish to come back to wild fish stocks, and seriously deteriorating a situation that is already bad. And so it is critical for ocean conservation and for the protection of fish stocks and biodiversity that we find an alternative to fish meal. There are a number of technologies. One of them is some of them are based on bacteria, some of them are based on algae, but the one that is ready to scale today is insects. And so currently, we, as Blue Ocean's partners, we're actually working on executing an investment in one of the very few companies in the world that can scale the production of insects for fish, for farmed fish, as a feed for farmed fish. And they're raising funds to build a factory that with a capacity of 5,000 tons per year. And so we believe that this innovation can achieve a systemic impact. Basically, if we look at it, it can help us make our transition from, it is critical to help us make our transition from hunter-gatherers of fish to farmers, sustainable farmers of fish. And at the same time, it's a very attractive investment opportunity because, as I say, there's a very acute supply-demand mismatch in the fish meal market, which resulted in the cost of fish meal in the price of fish meal in the quadrupling of the price of fish meal in the past 15 years only, and it is a $7 billion market. So by investing in this innovation, not only are we investing in a critical innovation for oceans, but also investing in innovation that can, in a company that can become a leader in a large, high-growing market and take a leadership position and generate very attractive returns. So this is one example. I can actually say the name of this company. The company is called Next Protein, if you want to look it up. And so now moving to the second example, what you see on this picture, so I'm not a well expert, but I think it's a humpback whale. And if you look carefully, you can see that not only does it have seaweed, but it's actually entangled in a rope, which is probably coming from a line, a signaling line attached to a signaling buoy that is used for, in static fishing techniques like for crab fishing or lobster fishing. And so this is a critical issue. Those of you who are in the US may have heard of the issue of the North Atlantic right whale entanglements, and the whales get caught in the ropes used by fishermen, and I think statistics show that over 95% of whales of the east, the coast of New England have actually scars from those ropes, and entanglement is considered as one of the main reasons for the situation of North Atlantic right whales, which is close to extinction, with only 400 individuals left. But fishing gear are causing other problems also through ghost fishing. So those nets and fishing gear that are lost by fishermen, and there are estimates that continue to fish for hundreds of years because they're made of plastic. There are estimates that put the share of fishing gear that are lost to up to 20 to 40% of fishing gears in some fishing techniques, like static fishing techniques. And I think the lowest estimates are that up to 10% of plastic pollution actually comes from fishing gear that are lost. So this is a very critical problem for oceans. And there are solutions that can come from innovation. So we are currently working with a company that has developed a smart buoy that substitutes the signaling buoy that are used by fishermen to localize, to identify, to geolocalize their fishing gear. So what they do traditionally is they have a fishing, either a gill net or a fishing trap that lies at the bottom of the sea, and then it is connected by a line to a signaling buoy floating at the surface. But because of that, the line and the signaling buoy, the fishing gear can be lost because of bad weather. It can be lost because of traffic from other boats, or it can be lost because of competitors. And this company that we're working with has actually developed a submersible buoy that substitutes the floating buoy, and instead of sitting at the surface, sits below the level of the swell, typically between 20 and 40 meters, and therefore is not subject to traffic from other boats, not subject from the swell to bad weather, and not subject to competitors who would want to see the buoy and want to either to collect the catch or cut the net. And so this innovation, and when the fisherman wants to collect its gear back, it just triggers a sonar signal, an acoustic signal, and that brings the buoy back to the surface. And so this is an innovation that can help address this issue, and therefore potentially help address up to 10% of plastic pollution, because it's a ropeless system, can help address also the issue of well entanglement. So you can see how you can achieve very large scale impact but it's also a very attractive investment opportunity, because it was devised actually as a response to the demand from fishermen who were fed up with losing their fishing gear, which means they lose their material, they have to buy it, to spend money to buy the fishing gear back. They spend money to look for it, and they lose their catches. So if you look at all those costs that losing fishing gear generate, actually the solution of this company we're working with can offer the fishermen a return on investment, a payback period of less than 2 years. So it's a very attractive investment opportunity for the fishermen, and this is at a price point that is also a very attractive investment opportunity for the entrepreneur and the investors that are going to back this company. And this solution is already, the technology is proven, and again, it can scale now. So that's the second example. Now, on this picture, what you see is what is an example of waste sorting infrastructure in Japan, and I believe it probably illustrates what's the best we can do in terms of sorting plastics. So separating waste into 5 categories, and if the Japanese can do that, I'm not sure that French people can do that. Probably beyond two sorting bins, we get confused. So that's probably illustrates the best we can do as human beings, caught in our daily life. But that illustrates also a huge problem, one of the root causes of the problem of plastic waste. One of the reasons why we're not able to properly, collect, sort, and recycle plastic is that recycling facilities cannot match the complexity of the plastics that we use. Just as in terms of types of resins, we use more than 10 types of resins, from polyethylene, high density, low density, polystyrene, and polypropylene, and others. But the number of types of plastics that we use goes way beyond that. And if you take into account the additives that we use, for instance, the colors that we use, and because of that complexity, we're not able to sort them properly. We're not able to recycle them properly, and therefore the cost of recycling is very high. And it's very inefficient. And this is one of the reasons why waste plastic has very low value. So one of the ways that innovation can address that is to actually make it much easier to sort plastic. And so this is why we're very interested in innovation that we think is about to scale now, which was developed by a company in the Netherlands. It's a watermarking system. You can imagine it as a QR code that is put on every single plastic packaging that we use, or container, that is actually embossed in the plastic itself. So it's not printed on the plastic. So it's a 3D watermark, if you will. It cannot be seen, or it can barely be seen by the naked eye. But it can very easily be read by even just a smartphone camera, and very rapidly as well. And what this technology enables is to perfectly identify every single plastic, even if it's if it's damaged, if it's distorted, if it's dirty, it can still be read with very high accuracy, and therefore it can carry the information of what type of plastic it is, and make the sorting and bring basically the sorting efficiency to 100%. And you know that for some plastics, like the black or the dark plastics, because we use infrared as a sorting technology, those types of plastics that are black or dark cannot be sorted. So for some types of plastic, we can bring the sorting efficiency from 0 to 100% with this type of with this innovation. So we believe it can play a critical role in making recycled plastic much cheaper, much more competitive, and therefore potentially combined probably with other innovations, more competitive than virgin plastic, and therefore achieve systemic change. And at the same time, you can easily imagine how this can become, and brands, by the way, the Unilevers of this world, the Coca-Cola of this world, are very interested in this technology, because they have the pressure from their consumers, their customers to address the plastic waste issue. And so this company, if this innovation can scale, has a huge addressable market, because it can be applicable to every single plastic that we use. And so we are very excited about this innovation and helping it to scale. Now moving to the fourth innovation. If you look, we all use, go to Starbucks or go to McDonald's and use single-use cups or or containers for sandwiches or snacks. And I think we can all agree that this cannot carry on this way. And so we are actually very closely monitoring a number of innovations that are being brought to the market today that will substitute the single-use cups and containers used in the takeaway industry by cups that are reusable and that are collected and washed and reused by the the retailer, the restaurants, and basically those solutions are bringing back the good old deposit scheme. The only difference in the way the consumer consumes is that it will have to pay a deposit. Usually it's a few dollars, but he can still pick up the container at the at the restaurant and take it away and deposit it in a lot of collection stations on its way to work, or or in another restaurant. And with these innovations, the consumer doesn't pay anything more than just a deposit. And these innovations have been designed so that the cost of the reusable cup or container is actually the same as the cost of the single-use cup or container. So you can see how there's a very strong incentive for the Starbucks or the McDonald's of the world to fully transition to this type of solutions, because it's just more competitive for them to do that, and of course it helps them meet their sustainability objectives. And on top of that, those innovations also leverage tracking systems that they embed in every single cup, through RFID chips that enable them to know when and where the cup has been collected, and when and where it has been deposited or brought back, and what was consumed, how much time it took, probably connect that to the identity and social information with the consumer, and therefore generate hugely valuable data. And so not only those solutions can be competitive from a cost perspective, but also can generate additional valuable information and revenues for the retailers and the restaurants. And so and to give you a sense of the extent of the scale that this innovation can reach, so one of the companies we're talking to has actually already deployed in 30 restaurants in Bali, has deployed in one large university campus in the US, and it is in discussions to deploying in one of the largest airports in the world. This is something that is happening now and that can scale now. And they, of course, I didn't mention that, but they also have test trials today with with the companies like Starbucks or McDonald's. So those innovations again are very tangible and ready to scale now. So we've seen a number of examples of how innovation can achieve system-level impact and rapidly. And the truth is that as Blue Ocean's partners, we have been, monitoring, screening, selecting, hundreds of these companies. So there is really an abundance of innovations that we can support, and this is why we thought at Blue Ocean's partners that it is relevant at this time to actually create a vehicle that would be set up exactly for the purpose of supporting those innovations and helping them scale, accelerate their growth and their impact. And so we have created our first fund called Ocean One, which has the focus on scaling innovations that help address either overfishing or plastic pollution. The innovations that we look at in the overfishing vertical include innovations that can help address, that can make fishing fisheries more sustainable, such as solutions that address issues of ghost nets, or solutions that can help reduce bycatch, increase the selectivity of fishing. Second, we look also at innovations that can help make aquaculture sustainable, like the one I've mentioned in the first example. We also look at innovations that can help make marine protected areas efficient, helping with the monitoring through the collection of data, through drones, through satellites, through smart buoys, and of course helping with the monitoring through modern analytical tools to detect illegal fishing, to better manage fish stocks, and so those are the main innovations we look at under our fish vertical. On the plastics vertical, we look at the whole innovations that either can help us reuse packaging as opposed to single-using packaging. So like deposit schemes, like the one we discussed, but also, for instance, the bulk retail, as opposed to the package retail that we all use now. Second, we also look at all the innovations along the recycling value chain, from sorting innovations on the design of the packaging, for instance, moving from multi-layered packaging to single-layer packaging, which will make this packaging recyclable, to sorting technologies, as I've mentioned, but also recycling technologies that can, for instance, depolymerize PET and bring it back to the original monomer with virgin quality. And basically, we look at all the innovations along the value chain that can make recycled plastic more competitive than virgin plastic. And third, we look at innovations that can replace plastics with plastics that are biodegradable in the marine environment. And that is relevant in cases where we're not able to reuse packaging or recycle plastics. And more specifically, we are quite interested in materials that can substitute polyester that is found in 60% of our clothes, and that is when we wash our clothes is shed into the sewer system and ends up in oceans and contributes to 8% of pollution in the form of plastic microfibers. So we're currently very actively working on the solution, on a new material that can be cost and performance competitive with polyester, but is marine biodegradable. So we've set up Ocean One to support innovation along those two verticals, but we've also set up Ocean One to fully embrace our dual impact and return objective. We want to offer to our investors the market-based returns, and that's because, as I said, we believe that by generating market-based returns, we can attract more private capital and therefore scale those innovations more rapidly. But we are also uncompromising in achieving system-level impact, and this is why we have, and I think it is unique in the private equity and in the impact private equity space, created an impact committee that is staffed with independent members, and that has the same power as our investment committee. So if our impact committee decides our investments are not going to have a large positive impact on oceans, we will not be able to make our investments. And so, to give you examples, the independent members are in our impact committee include people like Mr. Brad Ack, who was the vice president for oceans at WWF US, or Mr. François Simard, who was formerly director for global marine programs and fisheries at the IUCN, the global organization in charge of determining the red list of endangered species. And so we're very glad that such respected conservationists and scientists have been willing to join us in that journey and lend their expertise to us. I guess I've tried to give you an overview of what the challenges are, and I think we all know they can be daunting. But also I've tried to share with you our belief that innovation can be really part of the solution, but that if we want to size this opportunity, the opportunity of innovation, we really need to use the right approach. We need to use the right strategy, the right team, and also the right governance to achieve that in a scalable way. And this is, to do this has been the mission of Blue Ocean's partners. And so we hope that you find like us that yes, supporting innovation is an important tool for ocean conservation, and we invite you to join us in that challenging but really exciting journey. Thank you for your attention.
Christian, thank you so much for that presentation. Really interesting and exciting work with lots of opportunities. You mentioned, financing for nature is rather limited, but when you start to look at the amount of money that goes into investing globally, that's practically unlimited. So when we can find positive return on investment opportunities that result in the impacts that we're seeking as well, they're, in theory, and it's what people say, that there's really no limit to the amount of money that could go into that. So congratulations to Ocean, to you guys, and I'm sure there's lots of questions. I've got a little background noise here, so we'll maybe start with the first question from Elsie, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for a beautiful presentation, visually as well as in the way that you so clearly unfolded it. I have two questions. I'm going to start with the last one first. It's short. The notion of governance in this world of systemic change for organizations is a big challenge for all of us. And I'm wondering about this equal balance in power between your impact committee and your investment committee. Is this unique to your organization as far as you know?
As far as we know, yes, but we don't want that to be the case. I mean, I think our goal beyond supporting the specific innovations is actually to mobilize more private capital for ocean regeneration of ocean health. And so what we're trying to do is also to help create a new blueprint for impact investing that will make it more efficient and at the same time make it attractive for investors that are concerned with returns as well, while not compromising on impact. And I think we don't know if it's the magic formula. We designed this based on actually real cases. We actually built our impact framework and our governance based on concrete case studies, pipeline opportunities. We found that is the framework that is most efficient to achieve our goals. And hopefully it will be, we will reuse it again in the second fund, in the third fund, and others will use it as well. And maybe that with others, new models can emerge and help make impact investment, real impact investment, mainstream rather than on the margins as it is today.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Do I have time to ask my first question, Laurent?
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead. There's time.
Okay, quick question, Christian. So I hear family offices, other PEs in public forums talking about the lack of investable projects related to the SDGs. What's your point of view about that as an inhibitor to their participation? What's your point of view about that? If you agree, where's the bottleneck and how to address that? Investable projects meaning an innovation that's been taken to the point where it's investable.
Yeah. So clearly, I mean, in the space of innovation, that's not our sense at all. Actually, we are firmly convinced that there's an abundance of innovations that are investable today with a very attractive risk-return profile and that are ready to scale now. And that's that's the core of our investment thesis, and that's the reason we're so convinced of that. Olivier and I, we resigned from our jobs, which were comfortable, jobs in the investment space, to undertake this project. So we are ready to take the risk because we know there is a real pipeline. So this is companies that we have mapped, the investment universe. We have hundreds of companies in our database. At any point in time, we're actively working on in our top priority pipeline on 10 companies that we could invest in the next couple of months. And as we speak, though the fund is still being built, we started investing on a standalone basis, on a club deal basis. So we are already investing in these companies. So for us, there is no question that there are opportunities in the innovation space. That being said, they're not that easy to find. I think they're not that difficult, actually. It didn't take us so much time to find, but they're not that easy to assess properly. You need expertise, you need industry expertise, because we're talking about, the waste value chain, we're talking about aquaculture, we're talking about fishing, fisheries, and so we need industry expertise. And in our team, we not only have Olivier and myself, the two founders, and who are investment professionals, but we also have more than a dozen industry experts who come from from the waste management. They come from Veolia, they come from Suez, they come from there is a CEO of fisheries and one of the leading leading fish farms in Northern Africa. So we have this industry expertise. And second, we also have the impact and science expertise with people like Brad Ack and François Simard, who are in investment in our impact committee, as I've mentioned. So it does require a combination of skills that we don't often see together: investments, industry, conservation, and that's where probably one of the reasons why there's a feeling that we don't find the right opportunities. But we've set up Blue Oceans Partners and Oceans One exactly to address that. And now I think if you look at the universe of conservation projects that we can invest in, I think it's often found that investing in traditional infrastructure, projects like waste collection or waste in emerging markets or in Southeast Asia, or in sustainable fisheries in Madagascar or in Costa Rica. All this, it's hard to find this type of projects with an adequate risk-return profile, and that is because it's true. I mean, if you just take the example of infrastructure, traditional infrastructure, it's expensive, it's capital intensive. There's no ready market, there's no market for the waste. Even if it's recycled and transformed, the prices are very low. And often it requires, government regulatory framework that is not in place, so it's risky because those investments are made under the form of PPPs, public-private partnerships. And so, if you look at traditional projects, there are a lot of hurdles that explain why it's hard to find investable projects. And we need to continue to work on addressing those issues so that we have more investable projects. But the challenges remain by and large. And this is why we're saying, while we continue to do this, we can also invest in innovation where there are much more projects that are investable and that can attract large amounts of capital.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you're saying that, I mean, basically, nature conservation-based investments are still challenging, but we can, use a lot of this innovation as a way to get at some of the root problems anyway. So it's a really interesting approach. Laurent had a question, and then after that, Théophile.
Yeah, can you hear me well?
I can,
yes.
Okay, perfect. Yes, thank you, Christian. This is Laurent from Geneva, actually, and thank you. This was a great presentation. I just want to ask you if you could say a few words, perhaps, on the data and perhaps big data aspect of your investment in relation to ocean conservation. We've heard a lot about, especially from the tech industry, about the value of data. I think you mentioned in a few of your examples, but I would like perhaps for you to elaborate a little bit, and if that's something that could drive more capital or private capital funding from the tech investors. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Laurent, and nice to be speaking with you, and thanks for joining. So you're right. Data is actually at the heart of our strategy, both on the plastic vertical and the fish vertical. But I think it's quite easy to understand if you look at for instance, the space of marine protected areas. I think there is a growing consensus globally that we need to increase the share of marine protected areas, and the objective of 30% of marine areas being protected by 2030, which seemed completely elusive just a few years ago, now seems seems to become a consensus. And so, but that raises the question of if we actually reach that objective, how are we going to manage those huge areas? And clearly, one of the key, otherwise, if we just declare that they are protected, but we don't have the information to actually protect them, they're just going to be paper marine protected areas, and will not have achieved much. So clearly, collecting the right data and being able to analyze it is key to achieving our conservation goals in that respect. And this is why we're interested in solutions based on satellites or low-cost vessel tracking systems that can be affordable for small boats, or smart buoys that use all types of sensors, including acoustic sensors, to actually collect the relevant data to help better manage those areas, detect illegal fishing, better estimate fish stocks, better natural habitat modeling, and therefore, just overall good management of those marine protected areas. So this is hugely important. And what is, I think, interesting is that data is very versatile. So once you collect data, you can use it for marine protection, but you can also use it for weather forecast. You can use it to optimize. Once you understand currents better, you can also optimize routes for boats, and therefore reduce fuel consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. And so there are many ways that data can be beneficial, way beyond just marine protected areas, and that also creates many ways. Creating data and analyzing data can generate revenues. And this is why this is a very attractive investment opportunity as well. And we have this very interesting alignment of impact and returns. And I'd say there's a third dimension of data that is critical, we believe. It is that data can create good governance, because data can be the basis to create accountability. And here I will take an example from the plastics value chain. So if we scale this innovation that I've mentioned earlier that helps us track every single plastic packaging that we create, and we can actually not only include in the tracking system the information about the type of plastic that is used, but we can also track where it was produced, by whom, by which brand, and therefore hold the brands accountable, or empower the consumers to actually know who produced this plastic and whether it was recycled or not. And so data has this incredible potential upside to transform the governance accountability systems in which we operate, and can create an additional layer of systemic change.
Thank you.
That's very fascinating. We're running a bit late here, but let's take a few of these questions, if possible, and then we'll probably close up then.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me properly?
I could not hear. I could hear a sound, but I could not understand.
Yeah, the sound quality is quite bad. Let me just, I'll just read it off.
Can you hear me now?
No, the sound quality is not good. I'll just read off the question, which is, thanks
Is it
for
better?
the presentation, Christian. What is the target size of the fund and LP so far? And also,
I'm so sorry.
about coral bleaching, do you see solutions specifically for corals?
Yeah. So I'll just repeat to make sure I understood, because so the question is about the target size of the fund and where we are now in building the fund, right? And the second on what solutions are available to address coral bleaching.
Correct.
Okay. the target size of the fund is 40 million euros, 40. And I just want to clarify that it's very much on the lower side of what of the size we would have targeted just based on the pipeline. We would have rather targeted 100 million euro fund or above, based on the the number of opportunities that we see. But we know we're innovating in several ways. We're a first-time fund, and therefore we decided to aim at a rather small size to start with, and raise hopefully faster, and invest quickly, and move on to the second fund without the hurdle of being a first-time fund. Where we are now, we have 2 investors so far that have confirmed their commitment, and so for a total amount of 3.5 million euros, and we are actively discussing with additional investors to reach the amount needed for the first close, which is 20 million euros. And while we're working on that, we started investing through club deals, so that are separate from the fund. So for our first investment in the insect-based protein company, we have so far have confirmation from 3 investors for 4.5 million euros. So that means that so far for the strategy, we have mobilized 8 million euros. So on the coral bleaching, so the main cause of coral bleaching is climate change. So we definitely want to address, help contribute to addressing climate change through innovation. We don't want to do it, in a very general way, because there are already a lot of strategies to address climate change. For instance, green energy. We want to do it in a way that is more specific to our expertise, which is oceans. So we want to focus on ocean-based solutions, but we will do it from the second fund, because we're starting as a small team and we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. But we're already starting to identify innovations that can help address climate change from the ocean perspective. That being said, I think the other side of coral bleaching is, the resilience of coral reefs. We know that coral reefs can recover. It takes them on average 10 years. And so to address coral bleaching means also we need to help coral reefs, remain resilient, which means addressing issues such as coastal pollution. And so this is also a very big part of our strategy. Again, not for the first fund, probably for the second fund, where we will want to address issues such as, agricultural runoffs, and which means we'll invest in, things like precision agriculture that can dramatically reduce the quantity of nitrate, nitrogen, and phosphate that leaks into the ocean. Did that answer the question?
Excellent. Yes, thank you, Christian. Really appreciate it. So we've run over. I'm sure that there's more questions, but Christian's provided some contact information on the last slide there, and we did do a recording of the presentation. So if you'd like to go back to listen to any part or share it with colleagues, that'll be posted on the Conservation Finance Alliance website and YouTube channel. So I just want to thank Christian and your partners very much for the work that you've been doing and for sharing that with us today. Really interesting stuff, and wish you all the best of luck. And thanks to everyone who's participated in the call, and thank you for all your questions. And we will be in touch for the next webinar in just under a month's time. Thanks very much. Bye now.
Thank you very much, and looking forward to staying in touch.